good evening to you as well. It is good that we are here, yes? Yeah, it is good that we are here. And I think just praying for you as I step up here and have the pleasure of spending just a few minutes with you here. I was just thinking of, it is good that we are here in this place. And I was thinking of, all the things that happen to us in our life and all the things that often stir fears. And we've talked about anxiety, we've talked about all these different things. And the beautiful thing about the present moment is where we are right now, is that we're safe here. And what allows us to heal, what allows our hearts to come forward is safety. That you will only share with somebody what you feel safe enough to share. And you will only trust somebody with what you feel safe enough to trust them with. And what I want to invite you to tonight is that Jesus isn't here to pry anything out of your hand. And I'm not sure if when you were a little kid, you played a game with a ball, and when you're fighting with a ball or with somebody else, you have it in your hand, and they're trying to pry it out of your heart and out of your hand, and it hurts, doesn't it? Usually gets scratched, and the ball sometimes gets popped, or the toy is broken, and everybody's hurt after that. And I just want to tell you tonight that Jesus has no interest in prying anything out of your hand. He just wants to be with you. So just with that invitation, and wherever the Lord just wants to meet you this evening, he's just so kind and gracious, So one of my favorite things about him is just he's such reverence of every single person. And he has deep reverence of you. And he respects you so much. So with that, if it's okay with you, and we've done this a little bit today already in the workshop and also with the ladies and the women's session this morning, but I'm just going to invite you just once again to close your eyes, okay? And just settle into your chair. And just feel the weight of the chair underneath you. Just take a deep breath all the way in, and just all the way out. I just want to invite you to notice in the safety of this place, just what's happening in your heart right now. What's happening in your body. What are you noticing? Just as you notice that, I'm just going to ask you to go ahead and offer that on the altar of your heart. And just set it right there. And if it's okay, I'm just going to ask the Lord to come and sit beside you this evening. So Jesus, I just pray that in your gentle kindness, that you would just come sit beside each one of us tonight and just be with us. Just open our hearts, Lord. Restore our hearts. For your love is very kind. And you are in no hurry. And you love us. So let's take another deep breath all the way in. And all the way out. And I love what Paul was talking about in Genesis when God goes in search of Adam and Eve. And I know it's very easy for us to kind of attribute a tone of voice to God. And he always surprises us in just his beauty of how he comes in concern for his children because he knows his children are broken. And that's his question that he asks them is, where are you? And I've been sharing a story lately with some audiences. I live in the great nation of Texas, so that's where I live. I live in the deep south, yeah, so give it up, yeah. And like Georgia, it's very hot there most of the year. And I had this experience that happened to me last fall. And in the middle of November, it's very common in Texas for it to be 85, 90 degrees in the middle of November. And I live in South Texas. I live in Corpus Christi. I live like 2 hours away from Mexico. So I was driving north to Austin to do a retreat in Austin. And I'm not familiar with the city of Austin, but before I started my retreat, I wanted to look at their art museum. I love art. So I was driving myself to the art museum, and the art museum that I was visiting is downtown. It's on the campus of the University of Texas. And so I was driving to the University of Texas, and I'm just driving on the interstate, and I'm pulling off the interstate. As I notice as I get closer to downtown Austin, that there's a lot of tents underneath the overpasses on the freeways. And that's very common in warm climates, a lot of homeless population, but there were just so many. Like, I just, overpass after overpass, there were so many tents just parked, one by one by one underneath all of these overpasses. And I got off my exit to go to the art museum, and I stopped at the red light. And to my left, there was yet another set of many tents. But there was one man there that caught my attention. And he was probably in his mid-20s, and he had white socks on, and he had cargo shorts on, and he had a t-shirt on. and he had his blonde hair like piled in a bun. And as I was stopped at the stoplight, I was just captivated by watching him, because what he was doing is he had a shopping cart and he had a blanket in his hand and he was folding this blanket and it wasn't right, and he just kept shaking it out and he refolded it and he shook it out again and he refolded it, and I saw that he had another blanket already over his shopping cart that was expertly folded. And as I was watching him fold the crease out, as he held the blanket up to his chest, I was watching him fold the crease out, and the first thing that I thought was, I bet his mama taught him that. And then in a moment I thought, man, how'd you get here? How did you get here? How did you get to be maybe 24 years old living under an overpass in Austin, Texas? Like, what happened? I mean, is this an improvement from what he grew up with? Is this actually better than what his family had to offer? Are his mom and dad 8 miles down the road saying, "Where are you?" to their son? What's going on? And as I just watched him that day, as I just was pierced by his beauty and just wondering that about his life, my light turned green at the intersection. And I turned left. And I went to the art museum. And when I came back, he was gone. And I never saw him again. But as you can tell, he lives deeply in my heart. And really, I think that's a question that, the Lord asks a lot of us, is like, how did you get here? And if I were to ask you tonight, to ask you that question, like, how did you get here? How did you get here mentally? How did you get here emotionally? How did you get here physically? How did you get here spiritually? How did you get here sexually? How did you get here to where you are? Because we all have moments in our life where we're having these epic moments and we're with our friends and we're experiencing something incredibly beautiful. We're like, dude, how do we get here? Like, I have no idea. This is amazing, And then we all have moments that are just absolutely catastrophic. And we just look at our lives, and maybe it's an addiction that you have that you go to every single night, and there you are again with your addiction. You're saying to yourself, man, how did I get here? Like, how did I get here? And it's many times those very places, my dear friends, it's those very places when, we talk about the story of our life, that we have these chapters of our life we just want to rip out of the story of our life. Like, I don't want that chapter. I don't want that chapter. And we want God to do something totally different, or we want to be somebody else, or we look at other people's lives like we've heard all of our speakers so beautifully talk about. I want something different than what I have. And what the Lord does is he comes to us in our story, in these very places, my dear friends, in the places tonight that you named yourself. And he says, I bring you my love right here. Because our theme for the weekend is, restore us, oh God. Let your face shine upon us that we may be saved. It's not, oh Lord, renovate us. To renovate something is to demolish it and make it new with something totally different, something totally foreign. But to restore something is actually to rebuild it and to restore it to its former glory. So when Jesus looks at you, when we talk about the restoration of our hearts, my dear friends, we're not talking about something outside yourself or foreign to you. It is you. It is a place where your hearts have been broken, where you've lost hope, where you ache for something more, that he comes right there. That he comes right there in the most surprising of ways. And I was very captivated by the story from the scriptures that we're going to hear tonight, which is where Jesus comes to heal a man who's deaf. It's in the Gospel of Mark chapter 7, verses 31 to 37. And where Jesus is coming through foreign territory, he's not among the Jews, he's among the Greek speakers. These are not people waiting for a Messiah. These are people that are just living their life. They don't know about Christ, but he's coming to them in these very places. And he comes to somebody who is deaf. And the person who is deaf also has a hard time speaking. And here's what it says. Here's what Mark says. It says he comes to the region of the Decapolis where the Greek speakers are. And his friends, they brought to Jesus a man who was deaf and had an impediment in his speech. And they begged Jesus to lay his hand on him. And taking the man aside from the multitude privately, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. He spat, he touched the man's tongue, and looking up to heaven, Jesus sighed and said to the man, "Ephphatha," that is, be opened. And his ears were opened, and his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. The captivating reality about who Christ is that he comes to renovate us. He comes, not the renovation. He doesn't come to renovate those places. He comes to restore us. That he comes to restore. He doesn't give the man new ears. He actually heals where his heart has been broken, where he's out of communion. It's very interesting when I was studying this scripture, and I was studying, just the kind of what happens in the brain and what happens in the heart of a person who's deaf. So I'm just going to ask, just for a moment, just if you could be really still and just be completely silent. And for us, depending on who you are, that might be something welcome or it might be something terrifying. But imagine if this is your whole reality. And not only this, but if I were to speak to you, you have no idea what I'm saying. And not only this and this, when somebody's actually born deaf, just the way that their brain is shaped, that scientists think because the temporal lobe in the left hemisphere of the brain that hears words and that constructs speech and can recognize written words and things like that doesn't form correctly. So people that are actually born deaf have no interior monologue. There's nothing inside. And many times when they can speak, when they use sign language, they think in the form of sign, not auditory. There's nothing inside. So there's not only this, there's this. There's the inability to speak out what you want, the ability to speak out your desires and dreams, to be able to speak out where your heart has been broken, that people would understand you. And there's silence here within. And there's also isolation from everybody else. And the intense aloneness of that. And I'm willing to bet you, I know myself, that all of us have places of our life that are like that. Like Paul was saying, we have the brown bag over our head, or we can't hear, and we can't speak because our tongues are bound. They're bound where our hearts have been broken. They're bound by sin. They're bound by all these kinds of things because we can't hear. We can't hear. And then what we usually do is we just retreat. And we stand over here by ourselves. And we say, I'll be fine. I don't need anybody. I can do it alone. I don't need you. I don't need God or anybody else. I'm fine. And what I love how Jesus does is that he comes into this man's life at the request of the people that love this man. And I could imagine it's a crowded space, and this man's over here kind of by himself, and his friends, Christ comes into the city, and his friends go over, and they're talking to Jesus, and he can't hear what they're saying. He has no idea who Christ is. This is a tremendous act of faith and vulnerability on his part. He has no idea what's about to happen. He's outside of community, he's outside of communion, and he can probably see his friends over there talking to Christ, and they're looking over, they're pointing at him, and here comes this man who's about to approach him, and he has no idea what's about to happen. And I love it because Jesus is so respectful. Because out of respect, out of love for this man, he takes him away by himself. Such kindness. That Christ is respectful of you. Christ doesn't strip you. He doesn't pry stuff out of your hands. That he takes you away by yourself so he can minister to your deepest needs. And that man would have had to intensely gaze upon the face of Christ. And I really believe when Jesus approached him, he would have approached him with kindness and a smile. And he would have said to him, here, look at me. Look at me. And he probably would have gently motioned him over to the side. And Jesus is looking at him. And the man's looking intently at him. And this is such an intimate healing. This is how Jesus knows us intimately. Jesus would have had to get up right into his face. To be able to put my hands in your ears, I have to get really close to you. And Jesus is speaking to him in a language that he can understand. Because I would imagine Christ would have looked at him and he would have said, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to do this. So Jesus puts his fingers into the man's ears. And then he spits on the ground. It's like the release of his tongue. He spits on the ground, and then Jesus takes his own hand and he touches the man's tongue. I'm going to help you here. I'm going to help you. And I bet that man had never been that close to somebody like that. Somebody who was so loving to him. And you could just imagine Christ with his hands on this man's head and just almost like forehead to forehead with him and explaining to him in the visual ways that this man could understand, not trying to violate him or make a show out of him, And then he just takes him and he looks up to heaven and he just groans, like, be open. Like he calls out to God, like, be opened, be opened. And the man watches Christ call out to heaven, knowing that this is a work of God. This is a work of God. And when Christ groans and he calls out for the man's ears to be open, the man's ears, like we said, are not made, they're not given new ears. His same ears are made whole. He could hear. And the first thing that he heard was the voice of Jesus Christ. And from that hearing, from the touch, from the intimacy, from Christ so reverently and so deeply respecting this man, his mouth is opened. In the original Greek, it said that the chain around his tongue was unleashed, it was broken. And he could speak plainly. So his life is now radically changed. His life is now radically changed from this incredibly intimate encounter with the Lord. And we all have places like that. We all have places tonight, myself included, where I can't hear. I can't hear. Because my heart maybe believes lies, things about myself that aren't true, or about God, other people that aren't true. The parts of our hearts where we have deep etchings into the canyons of our soul, where we just accept life as a way as it certainly is, and the Lord's like, it's not like that. And from that, our ability to proclaim, our ability to speak, our ability to have the heart of Christ radiate within us is diminished. And so what Jesus does is he comes to us, my dear friends, he comes to us and he takes us aside and he speaks in a language that you and I can understand because he knows us. He knows us. And the gentleness of his love, the gentleness of his kindness, the gentleness of his mercy, of the incredible beauty of the man that is Jesus Christ, it washes over these places of our hearts and it opens them. It opens them. And when Christ opens our heart, we become more ourselves than we ever thought possible. Because you and I in our life, to save ourselves from suffering, to go against like this, the feeling of being vulnerable, or the feeling of having our hearts exposed, or the feeling of grieving, or the experience of just being totally radically open, we all have very sophisticated self-defense mechanisms that we employ. That's what we do. And many times in our life, because of the sorrow that's come into our life, and because of the etchings in our soul, like we talked about, there's deep lies that come about, and we make agreements with things to stop this suffering. And we make agreements with darkness. We make agreements with lies. We make agreements with things that for a split second try to alleviate what we're experiencing inside, but they end up binding us in the darkness. And these things have power. They have power. And what the Lord desires to do for each one of us tonight in a new way, just little by little, what he desires to do is to open these places where he is in our suffering, where he groans with us, where he says to you and I, be opened. Be opened. So where in your life tonight, my dear friends, do you need the Lord to come to you? Where do you need to come so he can gaze upon you, so you can see his face? Because see, Christ is alive. He's living, and he cares for you. And he knows every place in our heart, every single place. And he has been working throughout all of eternity to bring you here to this moment tonight, to open your heart. And all he's asking of you and I is that would you be willing? Because see, the deaf man in Mark, he could have said no, and Christ would have deeply respected his own autonomy. He would have respected his own will. Christ will never force you and I. Oh, but he delights to come closer. He delights to come into our heart. And, so a few months ago, there's a part of my own heart where I was noticing where I had this kind of callus in my heart. And I was at part of my heart where I was trying to save myself from suffering. It had to do with, I was telling the women this morning just my own story of being conceived out of wedlock, and my biological parents were in high school, and I really do believe my mom thought of aborting me, and so that I was adopted. I was given up, put in a foster home, and given up for adoption, and by the time my mom and dad adopted me, that was mother number 3 really for me. So this trauma from the womb of experiencing a deep rejection, a deep abandonment from the womb, and then being sexually abused and starting to drink, and then being very promiscuous in all these different places in my life, and all the stories, all the agreements that I made, even as a little girl, the agreements that helped me, it seemed at the time, to stop the suffering. I won't need anybody. I won't trust you. I won't let you get close to me. I will never trust God. I'm fine. I don't need anybody. I'm going to do it on my own. And what the Lord has shown me time and time again is that whenever I can, with His grace, just open those parts of my heart and come out of agreement with those lies, those are the places I'm just trying to save myself, that He opens my heart a little more. And there was this part of my heart that I was just holding on to. I could see it was like a fist. And a few months ago, He came to me in such kindness and such truth. And He said to me, my bride, if you want to be well, you will have to receive the truth here. You will have to receive the truth. And He didn't say you have to be resigned to it, you have to accept it, you better get over it. You have to receive it. And to receive something, you have to be open. And it was just a gentle invitation to renounce the places in my life where I'd made agreements with things that seemingly kept me safe. And He was saying, the only safety that you have is in my heart. And it is there that I will keep you safe. And there's a really great kind of a story, a picture of this in the latest Wonder Woman movie. And I know people made a lot of comments about that, but what runs through that entire movie, and I showed the women this morning a clip from when Wonder Woman was young. She was a little girl, and she got called out for cheating. And her aunt told her, you will never be great if you cheat. It's only the truth. Only when you can build your life on truth. The truth is the only thing that matters, and the truth is enough. And for us, the truth is Jesus Christ. It's not an abstract concept. It's a person. It's a person who brings us into conformity with reality, because Christ is reality, and He makes us well. He makes us new. And in this story, there's like this wishing rock that people are making wishes with, just like you and I, we make wishes. And we're not talking about the deep desires of our hearts when we go to God. We're talking about the places we make agreements, the wishes that we make in darkness, where we try to grasp onto things or people, all this kind of stuff to get us to stop suffering. And what it does is Wonder Woman herself made a wish. And her wish came true, but it was a wish out of darkness. And what happened is it began to suck the power out of her. And she could tell it was sucking the power out of her, but she wanted what she wanted so badly, and she thought that's what would give her deepest satisfaction, that she couldn't let go of it. Until it became very obvious that the only way for her to be restored was to let go of the wish and the darkness and to receive the truth. Because it's only through the purification of that suffering into truth that her heart was made whole and that her power was made complete. And that is the same for you and I. Where we have to come out of agreement with these places in our hearts where we believe lies about ourselves. Where we've had experiences where people say, nobody loves you, nobody cares, you're all alone, you're never going to get better. You're abandoned, you're rejected, you're shameful. Your life is marked in fear, you're confused, you're powerless. And so what we do is we agree with that, or we try to grab onto things that will go against that. And what Jesus is asking us tonight, He's coming to us, and He wants to put His fingers in our ears, and He wants to put His finger on our tongue, and He wants to say to our heart, be opened. What I'm going to show you is the clip at the very end, because Wonder Woman has to make a decision. And the man who has become the wish granter of the entire world is now broadcasting to the world, like to have everybody eat like the Satan, make your wish, make your wish, make your wish. And he's broadcasting to the entire world, and she finds a way to circumvent that, and she's going to say something to you. She's going to say something to you. And so I want to make that invitation to you as well. Can you show us that clip, please?
I've never wanted anything more. But He's gone. That's the truth. And everything has a price. One I'm not willing to pay. Not anymore. This world was a beautiful place, just as it was. And you cannot have it all. You can only have the truth. And the truth is enough. The truth is beautiful. So look at this world. And look at what your wish is costing it. You must be the hero. Only you can save the day. Renounce your wish if you want to save this world.
Why would I? When it's finally my turn! The world belongs to me! You can't stop me! No one can!
I wasn't talking to you.
Oh.
I was talking to everyone else. Because you're not the only one who has suffered. Who wants more. Who wants them back. Who doesn't want to be afraid anymore. Or alone.
Stop! Cut the signal! Stop!
Or frightened. Or powerless. Because you're not the only one who imagined a world where everything was different.
Where in your life, my dear friends, have you experienced the same thing? Where you didn't want to be alone anymore, and you didn't want to suffer, and you didn't want to feel powerless? Where you wanted something back that you lost, and it's like you'd give anything to have that back. And where in your life has suffering born a deep sorrow, where the deafness has come, and the binding has come, and the enemy has come to tell you a different story. Because this is exactly the place that Christ would like to come to your heart this evening, if that's okay with you. What in your life do you believe about yourself? What are the stories that you tell yourself? And even just one place, I'm always about the one thing. It's actually very simple. Let us ask the Lord, my dear friends, that just tonight, and I'm just going to invite you to close your eyes if that's okay. Let us just not self-censor. Let's be very honest. For every single one of us here tonight in this room, what is the one place in our life where Jesus wants to bring restoration? Where he wants to rebuild that? And would you be willing, and I'm just going to ask you some questions over your heart. Would you be willing tonight to come out of agreement with some lies? Things like shame and abandonment and lust and fear. And lies that say nobody cares for you, nobody's here for you, you're never going to be well. You're always going to be like this, nothing's ever going to work out. Because the Lord has a different story for us. Because he is the truth. And the truth is all that matters. Because it's Christ himself who would very gently and very reverently just like to take one step closer to you tonight, if that's okay. And in his love for you, allow you to hear and bring your heart back to life so you can bear and speak the truth. For Christ is the truth who loves you, and that is forever. So let's just pray, huh?